What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Gary McKenzie back at you for another episode of Gridiron Lines. This is RGR Football. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about a few things. One of them is we're going to talk about the Chiefs defense briefly. Then we're going to jump into some numbers regarding Week 12 matchups and how they affect the Chiefs' playoff seeding. And then lastly, we'll get into Reed's grade. The playoff seeding numbers that we're going to show you in this episode are probably the best you're going to see on YouTube. And I spent a lot of time crunching numbers just for you, wonderful Chiefs fans. So appreciate you all for joining us. And as part of that appreciation, here's the fan shout out. So this week's fan shout out goes to CEC Theater. Don't know your real name, but you're a handsome gent here from your thumbnail photo. But CEC Theater says, I think we'll see some improvements in our defense, both with players coming back, McDuffie, Gay, Clark, as well as playing an easier part of their schedule based on what happened in 2021. So wonderful comment, CEC Theater. Appreciate your share. And I agree. I think that with the few players coming back, McDuffie, Gay, and Clark, the Chiefs defense should do like they've always done, or what they've usually done with Steve Spagnuolo, is continue to drop their average of points per game allowed as season progresses. So looking at that, we're touching base again with the Chiefs' rolling points per game allowed average, and you can see they have started to kind of slowly make their way down starting in week 5. So after their 5th game, they've went from about 25 points per game allowed to roughly 22 and a half points per game allowed. So the defense is making incremental progress in terms of improving as the season progresses. And they've got a tough opponent next week in the Bengals. So it's going to be a good gut check to see where the Chiefs defense currently sits. So it's a test next week versus the Bengals. Not to toot my own horn any, sent out earlier this week where I mentioned the Chiefs defense, how they've done with Trent McDuffie and without Trent McDuffie, excluding that week 1 game where he left halfway through. So with McDuffie playing defense for the Chiefs, they've allowed 17.8 points per game in 4 games. Without McDuffie, they've averaged 25.2 points per game allowed. So McDuffie has made an impact. Of course, it helps whenever you play a couple backup quarterbacks during that time frame, but the defense still has looked better with McDuffie on the field. And this is something I've been saying for a while. Uh, Once McDuffie comes back, the Chiefs defense should improve, and that's been the case so far. If you remember a couple of years where the Chiefs defense saw the biggest change in points per game allowed, as far as allowing fewer points as the season went on, they added players to their defense. One year it was Suggs, and then another year it was Melvin Ingram. So I think that that player for the Chiefs in 2022 is Trent McDuffie. So they're getting a really good cornerback to join them midway through the season, and we hope to see that reflect itself in terms of points per game allowed. McDuffie's going to have a tough opponent next week versus the Bengals. Jamar Chase is going to be healthy. They've got T. Higgins. So that's a game where the Chiefs really need for McDuffie to kind of have a breakout game to really show what he's got. So I'm really watching those matchups between McDuffie and the really good receivers that the Bengals have. So speaking of the Bengals, the Chiefs are heading into this game versus Cincinnati, and it has huge implications. The Bengals have beat the Chiefs 2 times in a row, both last season, once during the regular season, once during playoffs. And as I mentioned, Jamar Chase is coming back. So as an offense, the Bengals are number 5 in terms of points per game scored. They've averaged 20 per game so far in 2022. That's a really good offense. And so that's why I'm saying this is a gut check game for the Chiefs defense, because you want to see how they do against this offense that's scored a lot of points. Kind of where I want to draw that line is I want to see the Chiefs give up less than 26 points in this game. We'll see if they can do it. I think if they give up less than 26 points, it's a really good sign that they are improving and they're heading in the right direction. But with Jamar Chase coming back, the natural question might be, well, how have the Bengals done with him? So in 7 games with Jamar Chase, the Bengals have scored 28 points per game. In 4 games without Jamar Chase, they've scored 24.7 points per game. And actually, that's my fault. Um, in reality, in 7 games with Chase, the Bengals have scored 24.7 points per game. And in 4 games without Jamar Chase, they averaged 28 points per game. So sorry for the confusion there. But the fact remains the Bengals offense has scored more points per game without Jamar Chase in the lineup. Now, it's only been 4 games without him, but they averaged 28 points without Jamar Chase. They've averaged 24.7 points per game with Jamar Chase. So what does that mean? Obviously, you want Jamar Chase on the field because he's a game-changing athlete, a game-changing player. Wonderful, great player for the Bengals. But they have scored fewer points when he's been in the lineup. That could be because of a multitude of reasons. I don't think that adding Jamar Chase into this Bengals offense is going to be a net negative for them, like their points per game totals suggest. But I do think that his impact as far as the points that the Bengals can and will score is not as much as some of us fans may think it may be. So it's a big addition for them, but I don't think it's going to make them kind of hit another level and take the doors off the Chiefs' defense. I think that he's a good piece, but in terms of the overall offensive output that the Bengals are going to have on Sunday, I think they could do just as well without him or with him. So he's a good piece. He's going to hurt the Chiefs. He hurt them last year, but not a hugely important thing. It's a big deal, but it's not going to tilt the game one way or the other. So looking at the playoff picture as far as it relates to week 12, there's 3 games that I really want to key off on. One is the Chiefs Bengals game. Obviously, the Chiefs are a 2.5-point favorite in that game. Then there's Bills at the Patriots. The Bills are a 5-point favorite in that game. And then you have the Dolphins at the 49ers, with the 49ers being a 3.5-point favorite in that game. Each one of these 3 teams, or each one of these 4 AFC teams in this picture here, excluding the Patriots, has a chance to get the number 1 seed. So this is a huge week in terms of playoff implications. And I wanted to crunch the numbers to see what the Chiefs' chances are to exit this week, still being in the number 1 seed, still retaining that top spot. So I took all the possible outcomes out of these 3 games. So it's a total of 8 possible outcomes. And you can see from this table here, you have, if Kansas City loses, Buffalo loses, and Miami loses, then the outcome is the Chiefs will retain the number 1 seed. And you can look through this and see, I've covered all the bases here. If all 3 teams win, then Kansas City still retains the number 1 seed. There's only 3 cases out of these 8 possible scenarios where the Chiefs do not retain the number 1 seed, and the worst they can possibly end up after week 2 or after week 12 is with the number 2 seed. And that's if they lose their game and either the Bills win or the Dolphins win or they both win. So in those cases, the Chiefs would have the number 2 seed. But punch it a little more to give like a nice crisp percentage likelihood that the Chiefs end up in the number 1 seed still after week 12. And so if you take the spread, there are probabilities for how likely that team to win outright given the spread. So according to that data, that historical data, the Chiefs have a chance of winning versus the Bengals with that 2.5-point favorite that they have. Then you have the Bills with a 68.1% chance of winning at the Patriots with that 5-point favorite spread. And then the Dolphins have only a 35.7% chance to win at the 49ers given that 3.5-point spread. So the Bills have the chance of winning on Sunday according to the spread. Chiefs second best, Dolphins third best. But you can take these probabilities and use them as independent statistics and make some calculations. So the most likely outcome in week 12 is for the Bills to win, the Chiefs to win, and the Dolphins to lose. There's a 23.9% chance that outcome happens. The second most likely outcome, which is worrisome to me, is that the Chiefs lose, the Bills win, and that the Bills would take the number 1 seed and the Chiefs would take the number 2 seed. You don't want to see that happen. There's one good thing going on here between Buffalo and Miami, at least as it relates to the Chiefs. Those teams are competing with one another for the top spot in the AFC East. Because of that, the playoff seeding will impact the Chiefs. So whichever one of those 2 teams does not get first place, the Chiefs have seniority over that team. So say the Dolphins get second place, but they have a better record than the Chiefs at the end of the year, which I don't think will happen. But if that does happen, the Chiefs will still have the 2 seed, and at best, the Dolphins would have the 5 seed. So one of those two really good teams between the Dolphins and the Bills is going to be a wild card team that has to play on the road. So that's a good thing developing this season for the Chiefs. And you want to see those two teams continue to duke it out and kind of beat each other up. But in terms of overall likelihood that the Chiefs are still in first place at the end of this week, if you add those probabilities together, the Chiefs have a 63.8% chance that they're going to retain the number 1 seed heading into week 13, and a 36.2% chance that they fall to the number 2 seed. So the numbers here are favoring the Chiefs, and you want to see them handle business in Cincinnati, but they have a good chance of keeping that number 1 seed heading into week 13. Lastly, I want to talk about Coach Reid's grade versus the LA Rams. I thought the team came out fairly prepared to play the game. They only had 3 penalties for 25 yards. The Chiefs defense understood the assignment in the game. They didn't give up very many points. They held the Rams rushing attack to a low output, to low totals. So they were ready. They did have 2 turnovers though, which did not help. And one of those turnovers came from Sky Moore fumbling another punt. And I'm truly shocked by the stubbornness that Dave Tobe and the Chiefs coaching staff has had with trying to put Sky Moore out there. I saw him in training camp when I went with Dan, and he did not look comfortable catching punts. I could see it. I know the coaching staff had to see it, but they continue to try to make it work. And sometimes you just can't fit a round hole. Sky Moore has a chance to be a good receiver team, not only going forward here, but years down the road. I like what he offers in terms of his route running. I like his hands. I like his ability to kind of wiggle a little bit and break tackles, get yards after the catch. But for whatever reason, judging punts is just not in his DNA. And I'm hoping that for the rest of the season, the Chiefs don't put him back there again. Because not only is he causing turnovers whenever he's back there, but also that's just one little notch out of his confidence. Whenever he goes out there and makes a negative play for this team, he's very competitive. He wants to win. He doesn't want to hurt the Chiefs. And the past 2 weeks, he's done a really good job helping the Chiefs win in terms of his play on the offense. Special teams, not so much. So that's something I'm going to ding Reid for, is to continue to put the rookie Sky Moore out there whenever he's not comfortable catching those punts. So no more of that nonsense. Let him run the offense. Let him do what he's truly good at, and you're going to see him continue to improve and flourish. In terms of key decisions in the game, aside from putting Sky Moore back there to receive punts, I thought that there was an excellent challenge early on in the game where Coach Reid he threw the challenge flag to overturn a big first down reception. Close. So he did a good job throwing the challenge flag there. The play got overturned, an incomplete pass, and the Rams ended up having to punt. There were no 4th down attempts in the game, and there's good reason for that. It's because Coach Reid was understandably conservative in this game. You've got a 3rd-string quarterback playing. You've got a big game versus the Bengals coming up. You don't want to tip your hand too much. So I thought the play calling was also fairly conservative, and his aggression in terms of decisions they made throughout the game was also conservative. And in this game, that was the way to coach that game. So he did by kind of going just maybe a tiny bit vanilla versus the Rams, and maybe saving some of their better stuff next week versus the Bengals. In terms of play calling, this was kind of goes along with Coach Reid being conservative in the game. They ran the ball 30 times, which, as far as my memory goes, I can't remember them running that much, doing that many run plays in Coach Reid's tenure with Kansas City, especially with Patrick Mahomes. So they ran the ball 42% of the time and passed the ball 58% of the time. Pacheco had 22 carries. It was really cool to see him get that usage. Offensively, they were very effective. They got 6.1 yards per play, which is a pretty good total. And like I said, they didn't tip their hand versus a struggling opponent. I think they want to do some kind of chicanery there for a while because they brought Kalen Saunders in and goal line and ended up, I think, pulling him back out because there was a penalty or a timeout or something. and he didn't give that look. Maybe he's saving it for Christmas. Maybe that's going to be his Christmas present to all his Chiefs fans, or he might be saving it for some crucial moment in a game that really matters. So I thought Coach Reid overall did a really good job in this game. There's some stubbornness going on where he continues to play Sky Moore as a punt returner, but overall he did pretty well. They beat a struggling opponent pretty handily, and there were some issues throughout the game, but overall I give Coach Reid a 90 out of 100, which nets him a solid A- in this one. That being said, I want to know your input. What do you think about Coach Reid's grade? Do you think he deserved better than an A-, better than a 90? What do you think is going to happen between those three big games this weekend in Week 12? Do you think the Bills win? Do you think the Dolphins win? Do you think the Chiefs win? Do you think any of those teams lose? Do you think the Chiefs are going to exit this week in the number 1 seed? If you ask me, I think they're going to make it. I think they're going to still be the number 1 seed heading into Week 13. And then after Week 13, you get that really nice and juicy, easy schedule for the Chiefs. So their season's going to finish pretty well if they can handle business versus the Bengals. This is one of their last big challenges before they hit the easiest stretch of their schedule. They have a few more division games between the Broncos and the Raiders, and they have a game versus the Seahawks, which will be another good test for their defense. But overall, really pleased with Reid's work this season. Make sure that you comment. Maybe you'll be part of the fan shout out next week. I hope you're part of the fan shout out. And then always, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, get as many people as you can into RGR football because we love having you here. And, we need all the help we can get, getting more subscribers and all that good stuff. So really appreciate you for watching this video. And with that, this is Gary signing out with Gridiron Lines. Go Chiefs, let's beat those Bengals.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.